Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of TFT Hyperroll with Artark. So I took a few days off there because I needed to go through all the videos I had done, finished, and ready to post that 12.19 kind of ruined. I had a whole series and they pretty much nerfed every single thing I was doing. And while I'm probably going to post one of them for future, just because it was kind of a really fun video, I want to focus on builds that you can actually use. Now, this was recorded during 12.18, but this build is just as strong now as it was then. So never fear, you can use this build pretty much as is, even though there's one change to it that I'll tell you about when we get there. By the time we get to our first augment, the game really hasn't committed itself one way or the other. I'm not a huge fan of rolling the low-level augments. I like to save it, but when there's absolutely nothing I want, I certainly consider it. But in this case, I think that I can make use of cybernetic shell, depending on what I get. Once I see that I have another Sejuani and then a Twitch, I know I can go into a guild build, and cybernetic shell is pretty good for that build. So get ready for guild swift shot. This is a very sought after build because it's easy to get into early. You have Sejuani, who is a 1 cost, and Ezreal, who's a 1 cost, and then Twitch, who is a 2 cost. So it's pretty easy to get set up, and you can see we're against another basic form of the same team in our first match. Since I got the cybernetic shell, I'm going to want to get items onto champions early. I want something that'll go on anyone in my backline at this point, so I go ahead and grab the sparring glove because it has lots of different possibilities. It can become an infinity edge, or it could even be paired with the tier to become a hand of justice. I've also picked up a rel because one of the keys to this build is to squeeze in as many cavaliers as you can get. The concept of the build is very simple. You use your cavaliers to keep things further back so that your swift shots attack faster. Ultimately, your goal is to bring in a Zippy and a Jayce so you get more of the guild buff and it helps your whole team overall. This is one of those few builds that I would say that you could force because it's so easy to get into. The only problem is if you miss, then you're going to have a really hard time catching up. You need that 2-star Sejuani and the 2-star Ezreal really early so that you can get off to a good start. The next item choice is pretty much absolutely nothing I want. I could go ahead and grab a second sparring glove and maybe make it into a thieves gloves, but I'm not a huge fan of it, especially in this build. So I go ahead and get the Negatron cloak because that can become a bloodthirster down the line. The other key right now is that I get the shot at an early Zippy. Now, I did a whole video around our drunken little dragon before and showed what he could be used as, which was either a tank or an attack. This is not going to be a Zippy-focused build, but he's a blessing and a curse in that you can bring him in early, and he is a dragon, so he'll take up 2 spots, which could help or hurt you depending on the situation. It's time for our second set of augments, and I had gone ahead and put in the early Zippy, and press the attack is tempting if I was going to go all swift shots, but I instead decide to go ahead and roll, and it says, "You want more cybernetic stuff?" And the actual answer is no, I really don't. So I'm going to get second win and hope that my champions can hold up more up front. Now I can pick up the early Jayce, which is going to give me additional guild. So I can go ahead and put Rel back in and then Jayce into the match. So I'm now at 3 guild. While Zippy would have taken me up to 5, Jayce could be a better choice, especially with 2 cavaliers already in place. This also brings me to the one change between this and 12.19. Jayce no longer knocks people up. Instead, he just gains additional resistances in the new patch, but that really does not change the concept of this build. Since I got the early Jayce, I decided to pull Ezreal because I can now use Zippy to get us up to 6 guild. I go ahead and make the Hextech Gunblade on Jayce. I like that item on him because it will help heal the entire team, and then decide I'm going to use Zippy for attack and put a static Shiv onto Twitch because he will be attacking fast. While the Swift Shot speed buff is great, Twitch does get a natural speed buff as part of the guild buff, and I'd rather have Zippy attacking into their backline and then my cavaliers holding things up so we can do things like this where they're trapped in a corner and Twitch can just keep hitting with that static shiv. And as I mentioned, this build is popular. We both have 3-star Sejuanis with Warmogs. We both have Zippies, although they decided to give theirs the Cavalier buff and then threw a Hextech Gunblade onto them. We both have Rels. The one difference maker here is I have a Jayce that is giving me just a little extra oomph in the guild department, and I think that's helping me win. And it's time for the final set of augments, which I don't get to roll, but I can pick up a cavalier crest, and that person we just saw had the right idea. Grabbing a cavalier crest will give you the chance to make Zippy into a cavalier, thereby making your front line even more tanky. We've also grabbed a xayah, which is a critical second swift shot and will help with the build overall. Just to be a little more evil, I went ahead and threw the Dragon's Claw onto Zippy because it'll have a little more impact since Zippy is a dragon, but also give incredible amounts of magic resist. And it is Treasure Dragon time, and I'm kind of hoping for some xayah items, but I don't have too much gold to work with. Probably should have grabbed this because I could have made the Bloodthirster, but I went one step further and went, well, there's a Reforger here, so I think I can make something work with this. We're going to go ahead and grab it because it also comes with that Reforger. We can go ahead and put the Sunfire Cape onto Rel, so she's doing some additional damage in the front. Put that gauntlet we do not need onto a Karma and reforge it and hope we get a really good xayah item. We did not. We got a Gargoyle Stoneplate, which we can put on our 3-star Sejuani. And since this was the previous patch, along comes the mandatory Dragonmancer Nunu build, although they don't have quite the right items, and also Nunu ends up getting stuck on my gold Sejuani, which he is not going to be able to one-shot. So with him stuck, my team's able to beat them. So I sent a text over to Gary and said, I'm having a really good match right now and I'd like to do something fundamentally evil. And Gary said, how about we give you a Soraka while you still have 20 health? Because if you put a Soraka in the match while you have 20 health, Starcaller is going to eliminate one of the champions from the board. See, excess healing disintegrates a champion. And if you get lucky enough to get to this point in the game and have something like a Soraka, you're in a really good position to roll through the entire rest of the game without losing, because you're going to be up a champion in nearly every single fight. As you can see from my bench, I have an idea of how I can make this even a little bit more fun for me. Since I'm not really questioning whether I'm going to get into the top 4, it's guaranteed at this point as other people will knock them out, but I've grabbed a Shyvana to potentially come into the match at the next round. I'd have to lose my xayah and my swift shot bonus, but I think it'll be worth it for the additional dragon bonus and just the fun of watching a Shyvana burn people. And thanks to that victory, we are now into the top 4, and I can put my plan fully into action. So it's time to take out xayah, add Shyvana, and let's go. And of course, knowing Gary's at his desk means I'm going to get exactly what I want. A Morellonomicon is going to be a perfect item for Shyvana to set people on fire in 2 different ways, because her breath will now leave them with a burn beyond her original burn. I've also paired her with Jayce, so she's getting the shapeshifter buff as well. And while there was a part of me that wanted to stay true to the original concept and go with the Guild Swift Shot build, I just could not resist the opportunity to just see this. Shyvana drops and just wipes teams out. Although the surprising thing for me at the very end of this fight is where I thought for sure Shyvana was going to be the leader, it's actually Twitch doing the most damage. And wouldn't you know it, that the game's going to come down to the Swift Shot Cavalier team versus what was going to be a Swift Shot Cavalier team, but then kind of shifted over once I got the ability to do something just a little bit different. But this will give you an idea of just how popular this build is and how often you'll see it. But there's enough room for more than one to get into the top 4, and in this case, into the top 2. Which is why I say don't be too afraid of forcing it if you get something that shows you it could work. And remember, in this case, I really didn't like my augments with the exception of the cavalier emblem that I could give to Zippy. Other than that, this was not augments that were really super friendly to this build. But it's really, really strong. Even with the changes to Jayce, you can go for it in almost every game and it will help. Roll with it though, because if you get the opportunity to do something like this and bring in a Shyvana, go for it. It's going to enhance your Zippy through the dragon buff, and Shyvana is just an absolute beast, pun intended, and we end up finishing without a loss. Hope you enjoyed this wild video, and as always, have an absolutely, absolutely awesome day.